Sandra had always dreamed of a better life. Growing up in the slums of Lagos, she knew struggle like the back of her hand. The scorching heat, the constant hunger, the never-ending hustle, life had been unfair to her. But she always told herself one thing: she would not die poor. Her breakthrough came when she met Mr. Williams. It happened at the boutique where she worked in Lekki, folding clothes and attending to rich customers who never spared her a second glance. But that day, everything changed. Mr. Williams entered the shop with his entourage, bodyguards, personal assistants, and drivers. Everyone in the boutique knew who he was. A billionaire businessman, one of the wealthiest men in Nigeria, a man whose name commanded respect and power. Sandra had been the one to attend to him. His gaze lingered on her longer than necessary, and before he left, he asked for her number. She thought it was a joke. Why would a man like him be interested in a mere salesgirl? But when he called her that night, she knew it was real. One date turned into two. Two turned into 5. Within months, he was taking her on expensive trips, showering her with designer gifts, and spoiling her in ways she never imagined. He was much older, at least in his 60s, but she didn't care. Who cared about age when a man could make her problems disappear overnight? And then, one evening, over a candlelit dinner at a private beach in Victoria Island, he proposed. A diamond ring the size of a small pebble glittered under the moonlight. She could barely believe it when she whispered yes. She was going from a struggling salesgirl to the wife of a billionaire. Life had finally smiled on her. Their wedding was the biggest event of the year. The whole of Lagos buzzed about it, how a poor girl had married one of the richest men in the country. It was a grand affair. Top celebrities, politicians, and business moguls attended. The most expensive caterers served dishes from all over the world. But amidst the glamour, Sandra couldn't shake off an eerie feeling. Mr. Williams barely ate. He smiled at the guests, but his face remained expressionless. When he held her hand, his touch was ice cold. Even when they danced, something about his movements felt stiff. Strange. Throughout the reception, she noticed people murmuring behind her back. Some guests would glance at her, then look away quickly, as if afraid. Even the staff in the mansion behaved strangely, avoiding eye contact whenever she passed. That night, after the wedding, she waited in their lavish bedroom, expecting her husband to join her. She had imagined this moment, how he would hold her, kiss her, whisper sweet words into her ear. But when he finally entered, he simply sat at the edge of the bed, staring at her. "You must be tired," he said in a voice that sounded off. Sandra frowned. "Tired? This is our wedding night." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Rest now. There is no rush." Then he lay beside her. But he didn't touch her. He didn't even move. By 2 a.m., he was gone. At first, Sandra thought maybe he had gone to the bathroom. But when she turned, she noticed the bed was cold. He had been gone for a long time. Curious, she stepped out of the room and followed the faint sound of footsteps down the hall. Mr. Williams entered a locked chamber at the end of the corridor, one she had never noticed before. The door clicked shut. She pressed her ear against it. At first, silence. Then, whispers. Low, eerie whispers. But there was no one else in there with him. Then came a sound that made her stomach churn. A wet, squelching noise, like raw meat being torn apart. She stumbled back, her breath ragged. The next day, she asked one of the older maids, Margaret, about the room. The woman's face paled. "There are things you should not ask, madam," she whispered. But Sandra insisted. She needed answers. After a long silence, Margaret sighed. "You are not his first wife. The others, they all disappeared." Sandra's hands trembled. "Disappeared how?" The woman lowered her voice. "Mr. Williams is dead." Sandra let out a nervous laugh. "What kind of joke is that?" The old woman shook her head. "He died 10 years ago, but his brother, a powerful spiritualist, used dark powers to bring him back. But he is not truly alive. He feeds. Sandra's stomach twisted. Feeds on what? The woman shook her head. I have said too much. That night, Sandra searched for Mr. Williams' name online. What she found made her nearly collapse. Billionaire businessman Mr. Williams found dead in his home. There was even a picture of his corpse in a casket. Her hands trembled. The man she had just married had been dead for 10 years. She had to leave. Now. She packed a suitcase and rushed to the door, but when she turned, Mr. Williams stood there. His eyes, sunken and dark, bore into hers. Where are you going, my love? Sandra's breath hitched. I need fresh air. His lips curled into a smile. But you promised to stay with me. Forever. His skin started peeling, like rotten paper. His fingers elongated into sharp claws. His jaw unhinged, revealing rows of jagged, blackened teeth. Sandra let out a blood-curdling scream and bolted past him. She dashed through the grand mansion, only to find the main doors sealed shut. Behind her, a whisper slithered through the air. You are mine, Sandra. Till death do us part. The candles flickered. The walls groaned. The air turned deathly cold. And then, darkness. The next morning, the maids went about their duties as usual. Margaret wiped her hands on her apron as she opened a fresh invitation. Mr. Williams was getting married again.